Hello. As always, Masha tells you stories and welcomes you to the 16th episode of the podcast Film Grazia Artis, or just Film if shortly. Here I share tales that inspire and reveal unique experiences of creators, makers and lovers of all kinds. I hope you find this program interesting and encouraging, whether you practice art or enjoy learning about other people's artistic paths and true faces that the public sometimes sees differently. Nowadays, as we watch and follow thousands of people online, we often admire their lifestyles and hobbies. We may end up using the same products they do, like home fragrances or workout gear, adopt their fitness routines and follow their advice on healthy eating. Yet, the lives we see aren't always as real as perfect as they appear. Psychologists have studied the effects of social media and the online lifestyle illusion extensively, and if we come closer to this topic, we can find out that they generally say about the common bloggers types, the mindset of those who aspire to live like influencers, the risks involved, and the real people underneath the public image. Much of what is shown on platforms like Instagram is curated reality, filtered and selectively posted. People share highlight reels, not the full picture of their lives. A polished picture causes a social comparison trap, once described by Dr. Leon Festinger in his social comparison theory, that explains how people evaluate themselves by comparing to others. He suggested that we naturally seek to understand ourselves and our place in the world by looking to those around us. The fact of social comparison can be either upward, comparing to those perceived as better, or downward, comparing to those perceived as worse. On social media, this often leads to unrealistic comparison, low self-esteem, anxiety, even depression, or fear of missing out, heightened by constantly seeing others' perfect lives or fantastic talents. This can lead to dissatisfaction with one's own reality and a desire to chase an unattainable ideal. Psychologists and media analysts often categorize influencers into the type of content they share. They are lifestyle bloggers who share aesthetically pleasing snapshots of daily life, often creating an illusion of constant happiness or perfection. Wellness influencers who promote health, fitness routines, diets, and mindfulness that sometimes set unrealistic body or fitness standards. Luxury or travel influencers who showcase exotic trips, expensive products, and high-end lifestyles, but they keep secret that they are founded by sponsorships. There are also authenticity bloggers who present a real talk or messy side of life, but these too can be performative in its own way and not really authentic. There are politicians, activists, artists, and people of all ages, and also children who frequently become instruments of parental manipulation. At the same time, there are those who watch this unfold as an online spectacle, and others who aspire to live like social media stars. But the real question is, why does this happen? The answers are rather predictable. Young adults and teens are most susceptible due to identity formation and peer pressure. People who feel unfulfilled or insecure in their real lives may try to mirror influencers to gain social approval or self-worth. Creative individuals genuinely inspired by influencers or artists, their aesthetics or careers and seek to express themselves through similar channels. However, there are serious pitfalls that following fake ideas can lead to: loss of authentic self, since people may suppress their true interests or personality to match trends. Mental health struggles due to anxiety increase, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism often result from trying to maintain an online persona. Superficial relationships and the cases of prioritizing image over real-life connections that may erode meaningful social bonds. So, that there might come the next question: is there any truth in influencer feeds? Yes, but it's partial truth. Social media feeds often reflect aspects of real life, but in highly controlled and aestheticized form. Some bloggers do share honest moments, burnout, struggles, failures, but even these can be edited or posted with strategic intent. Behind every seemingly spontaneous post, there is often planning, editing, brand agreements, or even scripting. At times, this obsession with living online feels like a new kind of emotional or behavioral disorder And suddenly, it reminds me of the song from 2004, playing on repeat in my head, and the fragment sounds like this. C'est le malaise du moment. The lyrics of Protège-moi echo an inner voice we all recognize, the quiet plea to shield ourselves from a world where social media puts flawless lives and curated success on display, while the real struggles and hard work remain hidden behind the scenes. What is behind the success of flourishing results that artists or musicians demonstrate? We scroll past glowing portfolios, fabulous works, exhibitions, and accolades, unaware that behind many of these creations lies something darker, something raw, wounded, and invisible to the untrained eye. We scroll and face the question: what if success was not born of ease, but of pain? What if the most striking pieces of art are not declarations of strength, but whispered testimonies of survival? Let me propose painting a portrait that reveals some shared traits of the contemporary artist, traits many are afraid to admit, even to themselves. But I'll be the one to take the first step and try. Imagine an artist who carries within a storm of contradictions, paradoxes, and inner chaos, constantly struggling to contain and make sense of it all. Let's call her Mira, a textile artist who stitches intricate embroideries into delicate fabrics, using them as canvases of her stitched narratives. Her haunting motifs captivate viewers, earning admiration and place in exhibitions and private collections. Yet, beneath the surface beauty of her work lies a profound depth of trauma, self-doubt, and quiet resilience. Mira grew up in the home where love was distant and praise was withheld. One of her parents was emotionally unavailable, the other carried all family responsibilities, striving to care, love, at the same time satisfying the standards of the partner. Burdened by their own inherited and unprocessed histories, parents offered literal warmth. Mira's childhood was a lesson of invisibility for her and cancellation of critical periods of her growth like teenage and youth. Dreams were dismissed, feelings ignored. In that environment, self-expression felt dangerous, and self-worth was a forgotten concept. As a child, Mira internalized a sense of not being enough, a seed that grew into relentless self-criticism in adulthood. This inner critic followed her into art school and beyond. Every stitch she sewed was shadowed by a voice whispering, "This isn't good enough." But ironically, this very sensitivity, the yearning to be seen, the ache for connection, would later form the emotional backbone of her art. However, Mira's path didn't unfold in isolation, at the time when her voice still trembled and unfolded in spite of her surroundings. When she stitched mostly in silence and doubted the worth of her own narratives, someone entered her life to cause a change in her creative journey. She met Luca, a quiet, perspective soul, a photographer and storyteller in his own right, who didn't try to fix her or reshape her voice, but instead listened. His name and appearance felt drawn from a biblical tale, with the name Luke evoking the traditional association with the patronage of artists. Where others overlooked the subtleties of Mira's work, he saw layers. He noticed the tension of the threads, the unspoken grief in her color choices, the coded language of her patterns, and more importantly, he didn't just admire her talent, he protected the fragile space where it was still growing. With him, Mira began to speak more freely about her processes, her doubts, her fears of never being good enough. Luca didn't offer grand solutions, he offered presence. He built quiet rituals into their life together, a shared studio, long walks without agenda, mornings filled with light and uninterrupted work. Slowly, Mira's inner voice, once faint and tentative, began to gain strength. In return, Mira offered Luca something equally powerful, the permission to be vulnerable. Her honesty cracked open parts of him that had long been closed. Dreams postponed, fears masked behind structure and control. She encouraged him to step beyond the technical and rediscovered the emotional heartbeat in his photography. In her, he found not just a muse, but a mirror. Their relationship wasn't about saving one another, it was about recognizing one another, expanding to parenthood, not only in scope, but in depth. The creative journey was further shaped by external constraints, the psychological strain of global lockdowns, the despair and silencing impact of war, escapes to another land and coming back, and suffocating grip of authoritarian laws that criminalize dissent and stifle creative freedom. These forces pushed them inward, forcing solitude, reflection, and ultimately transformation. When all the doors seemed shut and silence reigned, Mira turned to fabric, treating the cloth not as material but as a wounded skin. Fragile, scared, yet tender. She began using old clothes hand-dyed with ash, rose petals and rust, things that, like her, had some past. Mira did not just create to impress, she created to survive. Each textile piece was an act of mending, a physical conversation with her experiences. Needle and thread became her tools of therapy, pulling together the frayed edges of your psyche. As Rumi once wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Mira's work appeared the living proof of this truth. Her finest designs were born from the exact places she once wished to hide, the memories, the doubts, the inherited silence. The act of making became a ritual, a silent rebellion against despair. Her embroideries did not scream, they breathed, turning into quiet hymns of resilience. When people admire Mira's work today, they see the result, but rarely the cost and the journey. They see beauty, but not the wounds it came from, not the efforts and hundreds of spoiled pieces. They don't see the years of self-sabotage, frustration, the hours spent staring at an unfinished cloth, doubting whether her voice mattered at all. Yet, that is what makes her accomplishments real, not the praise, but the persistence. Not the clarity, but the courage to create in spite of doubt. Mira's story reveals that what is on her display is not a straight line. It's not always about confidence, clarity, or early support. Sometimes it's about the opposite, about feeling broken, lost, and voiceless, and choosing to speak anyway. In Mira's case, the brokenness became a breach. Her art appeared not just decoration but alchemy, turning grief into grace, silence into sound, and wounds into wonder. Behind many artists' works, public portrait or success is not certainty but struggle, and behind beauty often is a wound. Mira reminds us that artist's talent does not require perfect beginnings. In fact, the most profound works often come from those who had to fight to believe in their right to create at all. So, the next time we stand in awe at a finished work, let us not assume it was shaped by confidence alone, but by the fragile, determined act of healing in the shadows, supported by a steadfast presence of someone almost biblical in its quiet strength. Let us remember that. Draw strength from within. Be your own inspiration, and I will be back soon.